So I just want to say that. I don't even want to say that because. Well, that's me. So,
Could you give me like an example of what you?
Commissioner Wood showing up. I've heard the proposers saying, yeah, this habitat conservation plan is great. But Commissioner Wood, I was not saying we want the Democrats. Yes, I'll be on the news again. I'm excited about this resolution condemning the rest of the commissioners.
So you're talking about like figuring out how we integrate that.
Yeah. And yeah, I don't know how we have, I don't know how we have. So I think trust me, I need communication, but. I don't think it's essential for us to have real merit enough. And Jen, she ended up calm down. It says that here. As not representative.
Yeah, it should be part of that.
David, Jeff David, it's Fish. So Jeff and Carter, but then the president. Criticizing.
Don't get very long.
No,
Oh, I said there's that undercutting team.
no, because if it's chat, that's chat.
I'm sure.
No, not clear this chest. Right?
Whatever, but.
I think so.
Yeah, that's the team. I think she got every single one. I think it's chat, and she's. Transit logic, rather than. Because they will be. All three. By certain commissions and the rest of us. Well.
Are you very good at having some words in person? Yeah, I mean, so like we're getting roast in horse people. Yeah, so I can do that, you know, every place that they have a chat, I'll show you. He tried doing it and I tried doing it. Okay. And I realized
So I did.
okay, and so I'll show you what I'm talking about, but it didn't make this like, they're like,
because I'm like,
oh, I'm ready. Okay, I have this.
well,
Yeah, let me know.
thank you, Jeff. I'm still listening. Consider decision. For some people, because they. Still here.
Still here.
Well, Paul Simon's so crazy after all these years. I sent you Ian's information, didn't I?
Yes, thank you so much for doing that. I'm sharing with our design team there.
And I wouldn't have shared that had you not asked for specific. Because that's not yours to be.
I appreciate you clarifying.
Well, behavioral specific, I have to do this in for graduate school. It was English school, so we learned to speak that from specific behaviors, not.
No, I didn't have to start.
Yeah. So I wondered
Well, that.
Are you ready to present?
Yeah, no.
I wanted to give you a heads up, we're thinking, when it comes to going through some of the discussion. Having you take something and what happened last time is going through page by page. And John will be here, I'll be here to help facilitate.
Okay.
But that seems to flow well. Before. So we'll like guide you into that. Just so like,
Yeah, that will be good. Very good. Yeah, thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know if I had a script for today or.
Yeah.
Hey, how are you?
I have a cheat sheet.
I had a talk well, I made it through the snow, was slushy, no. The utility trucks, right. It was a hail. It was a hail of a drive. Well, this, so John Audubon, works with, I can't see it, I feel like I'm important. And I've been talking to them for years.
Hi.
Thank you. So. John. About how we especially for the cold. I'm gonna get acquainted with them.
Yeah, it's, I'm.
No, it's not season. Everyone was saying.
Yeah.
What's good? The outside is good,
Well, it's just.
Yeah.
And so there are people that. Supported and so we met everyone.
Hey, Terry.
Hi, everyone.
They're just getting ready.
Doing a sound check here. I don't hear any sound. Can you hear me? This is Terry.
Yes, Terry.
Okay.
We had it muted. Oh.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Amanda, is this what we are today?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to leave it to help with your discussion.
Good, thank you. Yeah, I just started get mine.
We're all ready to go ahead and get started. Work sessions are an opportunity for board members to discuss issues informally with staff and guests. The board encourages members of the public to attend work sessions and listen to the discussion, but there's generally no opportunity for public comment. Members of the public wishing to address the board are welcome to do so during the board's regularly scheduled meetings held twice monthly. And then we have two items. First is the county manager update, and then of course our strategic planning retreat number 3. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to the county manager.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the board. Good morning. Another beautiful December morning. So is the buyout and the public comment period. I sent a draft letter to the board. That there's at least a starting point for a letter as part of the NEPA public comment period. So if you have a chance, if you want to read that over and then give me any edits or feedback, and if you're okay with it, you can let me know that too. It's something that is getting a lot more attention right now in other counties. And so hopefully there'll be a good momentum as we go forward through the process. So as we've talked about, it would create additional restrictions and costs for any development and things like this. So it's something everybody's watching, and it impacts 30 out of 36 counties.
So county manager, if I go silent, it's because the power is out. So consider me a yes with whatever you want to do.
Okay, thank you.
Because if I can't communicate,
Yeah.
I'm a yes.
Okay, that's good to know. I appreciate that. So, and then of course, the budget process, we'll start having budget meetings here soon. So, and the ACP is still obviously out there, and they'll be part of our future budget discussions as we get more clarity on what all that means. The legislative session is ongoing, obviously. I'm personally ready for it to be over, but it's only April, so we still have a little bit of time. I did want to follow up on the states regarding the housing. The state did allocate the 140 million, which we talked about, to those original counties that were included in the governor's emergency order. There's 20-ish million that may be available for the rest of the counties, meaning not just the counties that were added to the emergency order, but for all the counties. order. And the only thing that we're gonna get for our emergency order is some technical assistance to try to compete for against all the other counties for a portion of that 20 million. So, so, you know, the concerns that we've voiced early not been assuaged by any of our input or any of our efforts. So, so we are going to take advantage of the technical assistance, and hopefully that will position us to take advantage of some other resources. But I just want to be really transparent with everybody that it's still, I mean, the unevenness of the approach hasn't been addressed. So, and then at some point, I know that the new coordinator for childcare will be coming. I'm not sure when that's going to be, but
Yeah.
so.
I thought it might be Dave and all that. Check this. Yeah.
So that's all that I have for my update.
Yeah. Lots going on there.
Is there any good news?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So as a lot of these things are coming down, from buyouts, ACPs, all these issues we're addressing individually, is there anything more proactive we can do as a board of commissioners to express our concerns about our rural county to Salem? I mean, because there's so many things that, you know, it is a cumulative, especially out here in Clatsop County. I guess the question is, how do we get ahead of the power curve? Because right now, we're reactive to all these things they're doing. Is there some way we can be proactive and try to, you know, do a preemptive strike and say, these are the needs of our county, and these are the needs of rural Oregon, and we're not being addressed by Salem.
Let's see that Commissioner Thompson, Commissioner Banger's going to respond.
I know we have AOC, I know we've got NACO, I know that.
It is in fact, thank you for way ahead of me, not a surprise. Commissioner, that is exactly the right question to ask, and exactly the reason to attend as many AOC meetings as possible, virtually on Friday, virtually or in person on Mondays. But that's the place where we make common cause and our needs get heard. That's the place where we have, in addition to our own county lobbyists and our fine work of staff, we have other lobbyists, policy lobbyists from AOC, and that's where we have more proactive impact. Thank you.
And I understand. Sit on my virtual AOC, but see, is there any?
Well, I know
County?
Groups schedule like, you know, legislative things, where a group will go in and just basically spend the day there, circulating and chatting. And so I don't know if that's something that as county commissioners, we could participate in and schedule for us as a group and just go, and I don't even know if we can do something like that as a governing body. If we need to select only 2 to go do that, so that we're not creating a public meeting out of the adventure. I'm not sure how we work outside of the county, just in general regarding our rules and regulations, but it's a thought of, you know, we could, you know, the different lobbying groups do that. There's no reason for us to not do something like that. We just have to make sure that we follow our rules.
Well, I think that's a good question that, as Commissioner Johnson said, that it's a good point too, that being proactive is always helpful. I think that we did that with the affordable housing, when we put together a very county specific call with data about the affordable housing issues. It certainly led to some meetings at the state level, but then things like the emergency order happened. And so even when you take proactive stances, the results are almost hardwired against rural counties. Not that I'm trying to be overly pessimistic, but it's almost like it's a voice in the wind, no matter what. And I think the effort is important and to be consistent. I mean, I think certainly Clatsop County has a reputation now of being one of the stronger voices. And I know it's a voice that they don't always appreciate, but I think that's what we have to continually do. So to Commissioner Toyoka's point, I think, you know, we can always put together a letter for the governor's office, and we deal, you know, with Regional Solutions, who's their staff is part of the governor's office staff, but I think we could put a letter just to say, here are the things that One Rural County are facing that are creating instability. I mean, even budgeting this year, we have created pretty much a status quo budget, but the instability of looking into future years makes it very difficult. I mean, we don't really know what's gonna happen, because I don't know what the impacts of the buyout are going to be. I certainly don't know the impacts of ACP right now. And so we're all just kind of waiting for something to happen, but the something isn't positive. It's something that's gonna challenge us as a community and as an organization. And so, you know, I think we do the things we can do in a very pragmatic way in terms of our finances to make sure that we're sitting on enough resources to have flexibility when these things happen. It's not endless flexibility, though. That's my caution, is that it buys us time, but spending reserves or having reserves isn't a solution upon itself. And so I think that we can certainly, you know, prepare something for the governor, for the board's consideration. And I think we need to keep talking about homelessness issues and access to state resources and some of the barriers that exist at the state level to really helping the counties that don't have the resources, because there are some embedded barriers that they need to address. And so I think it is something we need to do, but I think the reality is too, is what I feel is no matter how cogent we are and how pragmatic we are and how thoughtful we are, we're saying things that aren't resonating to the decision makers in Salem. I mean, and so, and I don't know what the solution there is, because I think AOC is influential. I certainly think we are as much as we can be. So, but
Well, environmental organizations loom large in the consciousness of the dominant party caucus. And I've been listening to a former Yamhill County Commissioner say with eyes of gleam, look at all that money Clatsop County has. Oh, we are the only county in Oregon that doesn't pay its commissioners. That's some of that money. And it goes on and on from there. We have eat and squeak and maintain the tightest of controls on our finances. And now that's going to be used pejoratively against us. So I think it's incumbent on us to do that public affairs, reaching out to everybody we know to talk about what's reasonable in terms of maintaining a county tax base, while we also focus on how do we heal the planet. Because I think that dual focus and communicating our dual focus and our commitment is essential. We cannot provide services if we don't have revenue.
Sorry.
Well, I think just as county manager, everybody said, I mean, we need to continue the communication, open lines of communication, always we have to remain optimistic, although it's easy to get pessimistic, but at least, you know, be realistic about what our approach is, and how we're gonna go forward. And Commissioner Webb.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that kicks in times like this is simply our relationships with state staff, which are huge. I mean, I think that because ultimately, no matter how the money comes down, it's going to go through state agencies. And those are the people who I pay close attention to and talk to, and make sure that we're at the top of the list when they start handing out some of this money.
And thank you, Commissioner. I think that is important, and we do have strong relationships with our state partners. And I think even they would say that there's barriers for us
Oh,
really
absolutely.
accessing
Absolutely.
resources, and some of those barriers are even, they're almost embedded and ingrained in how the state functions, and so even they can't reach in and minimize those barriers as they're going through an actual allocation process. And so,
But at least as long as they know us and they know that we have good projects. I am particularly concerned about the housing issue because of the virtual collapse of NOCOM. I think that's something that we have to just continue to talk to because we get so much of our money through the state for those things. So I hope we can move forward with something that's much more proactive for us, because they're not going to hear the state, even the people actually in the state bureaucracy are not going to be hearing much from NOAA. And so they need to hear from us.
I do have a question, for County Council. So the question about going down as a junket down to Salem as a Board of Commissioners. What is that impacted by public meetings law? Can you do that sort of thing?
I guess it depends on the meeting that you're attending. If the meeting you're attending is a public meeting, then that would be an issue, but if it's not, then it would be an issue. So if that's the case, I recommend you selecting two commissioners to go.
Or just dividing up 2-2-1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask
Yeah,
a question? Can we possibly today get a report from our county council about what happened in court yesterday about the,
Yeah, I mean, I'll defer to Chair Coyle.
can we do that?
Yeah, sure.
Do we have to go into executive session?
It would probably be better since there's considering current litigation that maybe it didn't do the quick executive session.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah. Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, we'll move on to our strategic planning retreat. And Terry Moore joins us. He's been facilitating the process. And I think we're going to kind of walk through slide by slide presentation. And Amanda, would you like to say anything before we get started? Or?
Amanda Ravenchuk, Management Policy Analyst. Thank you all for being here and reading through a lot of material. And I will pass it off to Terry.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, commissioners, staff, the public. Terry Moore at Portland State University. I've been working with you on your strategic plan update. Let me do a sound check here first. Is my voice coming across okay to everyone there?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm having a little trouble here. I mean, the sound is coming through. It's just quite echoey. And so I'm not hearing everything. So I'm going to rely on Amanda and Don to kind of help me out with this part. I'm actually tuned into Commissioner Bang's frequency the best. That seems to come across quite well, but so maybe you can just speak for everybody if that's okay. So here we go. This is a quick overview. Slide 2 is the agenda for today. And there are 2 items on it. And there's the looking at the actions, and that's a result of your last meeting where we were moving pretty quickly, and there were comments that we ought to spend a little more time on this. Staff agreed, and we decided to have this work session. So this is your time to talk more about the actions related to the focus areas that you have already decided on. And that's agenda item in the middle, that 10, 15, and 11 o'clock, both the same item with a little break in between. And then there's just a little bit of, at the end, we'll talk a little bit about what the next steps are and tie into what the document's going to look like. So that's the agenda for today. To give you an overview of where we are in the process, we go to the next slide 4. You've seen this slide before, and I'm showing it now because I think it's important for the record and just to remind you of the amount of work that has been done by staff and board over the last 6 months on this plan. A lot of board involvement, opportunity for public involvement, and you really are getting this process down to a really pretty streamlined operation on figuring out how in the context of a larger strategic plan that is a 5-year plan, what do you focus on in this year? What did you accomplish last year? What's done? What needs to be completed? What's new that we need to work on? And that's what you're in the process of doing. Just by way of overview, also a reminder that today we are not the board is not deciding on the plan. You don't even have a full plan to look at yet. We're going to give you just a quick view of what it will look like. But it will be the next meeting where you'll have the discussion about the final elements of the plan. So today's main events come in two parts. The majority of it is looking at assigning actions to your priority areas. And then the second part is just looking briefly at an outline of the plan and a partial draft of the plan. One thing that Amanda and I did as we reviewed that was we made a change in language that I think we both feel makes it more understandable. We used to be calling it strategic plan, for FY 2021, and it made it sound like we were redoing the strategic plan every year. So it's really the strategic plan for 2021. And then the amendments are what we're doing they were called amendments, but it wasn't really so much that we were amending the plan as we were doing annual updates consistent with the priorities of the plan before. So that's the language we're going to try to move to now, that you've got a 2021 strategic plan and you're doing an annual update. And this is your second, I think, annual update. So that's where any questions from the board or any feedback on where we are or changes to the agenda.
Looks good. Everybody's good.
Okay, good. Then the main item is to go through assigning actions. And my feeling, as we were discussing this with Amanda, is that it worked really well last time, given the really short time that we had, to turn it over to Commissioner Coelho to run that. And he just took it, started at the top and went through it. And presumably that would be okay with you again, Commissioner Coelho?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, fine.
Then we're going to turn it over to you to go through this at whatever pace makes sense to you and your board. And then I'll monitor the time. There's supposed to be a break at around 11 o'clock. And then we'll come back and finish it up by 11:20 and then come in with final steps after that. So Amanda will be running the slides. There really won't be many slides to show. You'll be working off of the document that's in your packet, assigning actions to FY 23-24 priorities. So unless there are any other questions to me, I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Coelho now.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Terry. So we're starting on governance, correct? We have the County Operations Sustainability Plan, which is Tier 1.
Chair,
Yes.
I have a board packet that I had before, and I have an identical packet here, so I can just keep the one I've got. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're all on the same one here. We've got the governance, county operations sustainability plan, Tier 1. Possible actions, create a plan for sustainable county operations that addresses how and what the county procures feasible energy efficiency goals for county facilities and equipment and fiscal sustainability. And outlined here are considerations in the staff's best guess on action items that will come out of it. So the first one, deliverable county plan for sustainable county operations, county's role, the collaborative partner and participant, and be the lead. Type of projects, it's a planning project, additional funds required, none, estimated month and year of completion, June 2024.
Question,
Commissioner Thompson.
is there a role in this sustainability plan for emergency services, or is this only the planning department? Will it be a collaborative action of multi-departments with planning taking the lead, or only planning?
So, if I could, Commissioner Thompson, so the county manager's office would be at the actual one leading this, and it will include all the departments. And so, and what we're really looking at is to develop some approaches that are backed up by policy to make sure that we're procuring resources in a sustainable way, So there could be adjustments to our procurement policies about what we buy, how we buy it. We could have energy efficiency goals for our facilities, and there may be, certain behaviors that we'd like to change with some staff regarding temperatures in their offices and things. So the sauna version doesn't exist. And so it really is so that we can be a good role model as an organization about how we operate to make sure that we're being sustainable. So it would include everybody.
And I guess with the fiscal concerns coming down the pipe towards us, part of me feels like this is the fiscal sustainability should be addressed a little, stronger, maybe at the forefront, because, our budget for our upcoming year is fine, but is it going to be fine in perpetuity? Probably not. And so I guess when it's asking, possible action, if we could lead a focus on fiscal sustainability along with dovetailing in energy efficiency and so on and so forth.
And what I would say, Commissioner, is that we will be taking kind of the overarching fiscal sustainability of the county as a separate process because it's so important. The fiscal sustainability here is just making sure that our operations are sensitive to not spending more money than we need to on certain things. So it's the economies and the efficiencies of our operations, and then make sure we're making smart decisions that also consider the environment, consider organizational culture. But the fiscal part is going to be done as part of the long-term strategy, which will be part of the new budget process that we have. It'll be a year-long budget process. We didn't quite take it as far as we wanted to this year because of the vacancy that we have within finance. But the goal is to have that fiscal focus be a year-long focus because of the uncertainties.
Very good so far. I wonder if there is contemplated to include in this the role of the commissioners in continuity.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
I've seen some plans that are silent on us and I want us integrated. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions on this? You're good? Okay. We'll move on to the community and stakeholder engagement, which is the tier 2 priority. This is develop the county's community engagement plan. You can see what which is the adopted community engagement plan. This is a planning project in June 2024. Any commissioners?
So this is a question. We addressed a lot of community engagement concerns and thoughts during the comprehensive plan update. Are we implementing those directions and thoughts and concerns in this community engagement plan? I guess.
Yeah, so I think, and maybe the chair it would be helpful when we get to all these, maybe I'll give a little
Summary.
Yes.
That'd be good.
I think that
Same time.
see how everything fits together.
So when we first started to really talk about this, it was even before we started making some adjustments to the comprehensive plan engagement process. And one of the things that was identified when I came on was just, we need to be understanding where the community is on issues of concern. And then we need to have transparent, reliable, predictable avenues for the public to interface with us. So they need to get the information that they need, but then they need to expect some ability to communicate with us. And that is on policy issues, but it's also just on knowing what's happening, getting to know their government better. And so the community engagement right now is kind of the big end of the funnel. And through the process, we hope to get down to the smaller end. But what it really is to get it from the commissioner's perspective too, which is what should the look and the feel of our engagement be? What I always say is the county does two things. We interpret public interest, which is a major role for the Board of Commissioners. And then we maintain public trust by providing effective and efficient services. The first thing though is we have to be relevant. And so relevancy comes from interpreting public interest. And so that's what community engagement often is part of the public interest definition. On the other side, though, there's a public trust part of that, because as we are doing the work we do, citizens also want to be connected to us. Whether it's understanding the budget, understanding what our ongoing priorities are, and to be open for feedback about our services. And so that's what this really engages in, is a really comprehensive, broad discussion about how all those pieces fit together, because we haven't really had a strategic discussion about that. A lot of organizations do a lot of work on the communication side, they do some work on the engagement side, but they don't always do it in an integrated way. And so part of what this anticipates is a more comprehensive and integrated discussion about what are our goals, and then they certainly would influence they would influence future public engagement processes like the comprehensive plan, or like affordable housing, or even how we manage advisory boards and committees. Is to look at really all of that. Like Commissioner Webb has asked about, surveys. How do they fit into a community engagement process? And really that's to interpret public interest. And so part of it for us is to say, okay, what are those elements? How much do we want to invest in those elements? What kind of training do we need to provide to our staff on those elements? Because again, all this ultimately relates back to culture of the organization. And so that's what we see, is it's a pretty broad brush that we hope to get down to some specifics, but it would impact how we engage on all those different things. But we don't have the answer yet. We just want to start the process and figure out what elements we want to include.
Thank you. That's very helpful, County Manager. What I'm interested in is a model of how I consider as feedback loops, so that we as a governing body do feedback loops with each other. We do feedback loops with, I want to say, the people from whom we hear often and loudly, but also people who are not necessarily usually involved, who may not have the time or the energy or the capacity, but nevertheless have interests that must be considered. So to look for the missing pieces and that's one piece. The feedback loop being cleaned out, and things that are impossible or illegal or ill-advised, that we respond to that early rather than leaving it hanging in the air, because the longer some statements exist, the more some people want to believe that they are not only true, but will have the force of law. And I think that has taken us down some unfortunate side roads. And I hope that we don't miss the need to keep updating and clarifying what is legal and what is appropriate as we go forward.
Commissioner, thank you. Just one of the elements, I guess, of the community engagement is we have to deal with these days is disinformation. So there should be key disinformation. So we need some sort of policy or action plan to handle that, because public trust is key. And like 2 days ago, I read an article from my newspaper, a local regional paper, is that Gossip County Board of Commissioners have defied the public in taking these actions. Not true, that's just a point of view of, maybe a parochial interest or something, but I think that diminishes public trust, in our decisions, in our process. So we need some sort of policy or action plan on disinformation.
And I think a good example of that, Commissioner, I think you probably have others too, is the election process. Because there's been a lot of information about elections, and I know all of you have also dealt with them, and we made a lot of effort last year to try to provide the real story, kind of the Paul Harvey version of them. I just aged myself. But I think that's part of what this engagement plan needs to be discussing is how do we provide our information again, we have to be honest, we have to be legal, ethical, objective, and so to make sure that we're putting that out there, so.
Commissioner.
I just, along these lines, we do a lot of proclamation work. We do a lot of, letters to the governor. And I think about, our own. How can we share the vetted information that's been vetted not only by county staff, but by our county council in response to large topics as such? And we did so with the short-term rental and the two, flyers that were approved by the state. But I feel like any large topics like that, kind of addressing it in a similar fashion and making flyers that we can provide as commissioners to constituents, and also on our social media page, but also on the website that is giving information, like all of the financial information that was provided from staff regarding the HCP and the impacts. And then therefore making fighting that disinformation battle. And then fighting also the person coming in saying Clatsop County has so much money. It would then hopefully provide that conduit, and being kids these days, I mean, if we can put it on Instagram and get a Clatsop County Instagram page with lots of likes, it would help.
Well, I think this is all part of the conversation that we want to have with the board, the staff, and with the public about how best do we go forward. So that's what this plan is to go through all that, develop an actual plan with your board's input, and then that way we all know kind of how we're going to move forward strategically. I just don't want communication to be a catch as catch can proposition. I mean, it needs to be something that is guided by the messaging of the board, by reinforcing public policy, the public decision, the limitations, the attributes, because really every day we are really civics instructors, and not everybody's watching us as we do it. So I think we need to figure out how to make it more visible. Because again, as I always say, local government is where the action is, and it's where democracy is got a healthy future or not. And so.
Okay.
Not to get into some.
And I just remind, we do have a lot to get through.
But this is a key, because Commissioner Toyoka's point, I've had people tell flat out lies. And county manager and I had this conversation. We take an oath of office to tell the truth. We swear that. Some people do when they're in a courtroom, and it may have made them nervous, right? Do we ever call it a lie? I don't want the answer. I don't want to discuss it, but I want to pose that. To what extent do we confront deliberate falsehoods? Okay, done. Thank you.
That's an important.
And you will tackle
Yeah,
that.
well, all of
as
the
we work through
details.
this.
I think it's details yet to come, and this is just the broad, this is what we want to do, is develop this engagement plan to move forward. The equity plan for access to services is a tier 2. And we have, this is the creative plan to ensure equitable access to county services.
So would you like me to give an overview? Chair?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So again, this goes back to the culture of the organization and what do we want to reinforce in the community. And what I'd like to reinforce is the reality is that local governments are serving. There's nobody who don't serve. And so, but in saying that we serve everybody, that's not sufficient. We have to say, what are the barriers from us serving everybody? And so when you look at certain departments like public health, that is serving a very diverse demographic, we have to say what are the barriers for us serving that entire demographic? And be honest about what that is, and then have a plan to then address it. And sometimes it's as easy as putting program materials in multiple languages. Sometimes it's having an eye towards geographically diverse service access. I mean, you know, there's a lot of ways we can do this, but I would like to, again, have a very open discussion with the board, with the staff, the public, about what those barriers are, just kind of setting the expectations for the county so that everybody knows this is one of our values, this is how we are approaching it. For me, I talk about it a lot in terms of the culture of the organization, because the reality is public sector organizations have to be big tents, super big tents. And we need to respect and honor everyone, no matter what. And there are winners and losers when they come in to receive county services. And so it doesn't matter what someone's political views are, it doesn't matter, and nothing matters. We're gonna provide, you know, awesome services hopefully to everybody. So that's what the real nexus of this is. It's just, again, there's some things that if we're silent about, people will fill the vacuum. And I would rather have us not be silent and have us fill the vacuum with what our values are, and that is to serve everybody. And so that's the genesis of this.
Any questions?
Just have one comment.
Yeah, Commissioner.
And it's to add, I know, right? It's to add, additional language other than Spanish. I feel like we're doing an amazing job honoring our Hispanic populations, but we also have a small Russian population. And so being able to provide information translated in more languages than just Spanish, so.
We will include that in the plan. Thank you.
Okay, we can move on to next item, infrastructure. So consolidated emergency communications is tier 1. Yep. So we all agree with that.
The sheriff's here, I don't want to put you on the spot, Sheriff, but the sheriff has been providing leadership on this topic. As you know, this isn't the first year that it's been on our list, and it's because it's a multi-year project. But if the sheriff wouldn't mind just giving your board a little update on where we are, because that might be helpful. Thanks. Consolidated 911. Sorry, Sheriff.
But you can take my chair with this chair.
All right, so with the board's help, we did a contract with Communications Northwest. We would take a look at the radio system infrastructure. We received a report about 2 weeks ago. Last Thursday, they came down and spoke to the group of stakeholders that is on the consolidation committee. The big takeaways from the report is that almost all of the radio system is end of life. The microwave repeaters and the radios, they're no longer being manufactured. There's no more parts. So basically we'd be looking at getting on eBay or whatever old stock is left to replace those components. A lot of the components don't necessarily talk well together because we have a mishmash of brands and things like that. And the big thing that they really talk a lot about is that we have one radio system. Maybe 2/3 of it is owned by the city of Astoria and 1/3 of it is owned by the city of Seaside. There's no one group that takes care of that system because it all meshes together, has to work together. And then I guess the last thing, both dispatch centers have end of life, no longer supported Motorola dispatch consoles. They did offer a proposal for a more portable Avtech console that is actually more adaptable. It's less expensive. It's actually owned by Motorola. So that's interesting. So we're going to continue to meet twice a month to work on this project. make recommendations. We have, developed a draft of, governance model. So we've done some good work, but I think the next part's, will be to finish what we're doing and then start talking to the city councils, commissions to get support.
So just as the sheriff mentioned, there's a group of folks that have been meeting on this regularly for over a year, I think. And so, and the good news on the consolidation front is that, you know, it's been a discussion point for a long time, so this isn't something new. But what has happened is that I think not the majority, I think nearly all agencies at some level are recognizing the benefits of consolidation, and that includes Seaside.
Great.
I talked to the Seaside city manager yesterday about this sheriff. I haven't seen him since then, but he supports it. And so I think that we're getting a lot of good momentum. What it's gonna come down to, not surprisingly, is to have the system that the county needs, it's gonna cost more money. I mean, it's not just moving the chess pieces, it's about, we need to improve the infrastructure. And then consolidation itself under a new governance model is gonna cost more. And so there's gonna be a proposition that every city and special district is gonna have to kind of reconcile, which is to get what we want, that's an enduring model and a legacy model, that's gonna cost. Because we honestly have been doing it on the cheap.
Yeah.
And so that's gonna have to change, to have it really meet the resiliency requirements and the expansion requirements of the community. So I thank the sheriff for his leadership because it's not an easy process, so.
Yeah, I really appreciate sheriff's efforts and our county manager to move this forward. It's exciting to hear making this progress.
So are we looking at are we looking at a bond issue or a state legislature? I mean, you know, 911 statewide gets funded in a particular way. Can we get some of that money, or do we have to only have inside Clatsop County in some way?
Well, we haven't really tackled the part yet, because we just got the report, what the best way is to proceed on the infrastructure. Of course, both centers get 911 tax money, and that's spent every year, just maintaining what we're doing now. Justin Gibbs, our emergency manager, he's been really effective at finding grants. I really like him. In fact, he did this project was $60,000, and he dug up a whole grant that hadn't been expended out of a door and paid for half. So some of the ARPA dollars you gave to this project go back into the bank account. So and Justin has been through a 3-county consolidation. And he participated in the last meeting. He's pretty knowledgeable on the radios. And so he's gonna provide his support to this project as well.
I think Commissioner Webb, you got a comment?
Oh, I have a question. What kind of money are we talking about? I mean, is this $150 or $150 million or?
No, so
Somewhere in between those.
yeah, somewhere.
Thank you.
So
You're the politician.
in the radio report, they suggested we could go from 12 tower locations to 7. With the microwaves, you try to build this redundant ring, and really what we have now is a hub and spokes kind of model. So it doesn't have the resiliency that you'd want, but with the 7th site, if we went to simulcast, we could get probably better radio coverage propagation with less sites, and they were looking at about $2 million to develop those things. Now, that's where it starts, and then when you actually go to build it, probably is a big turn.
Okay, that's not, yeah, that's.
I have a question, and I don't know if this has been thought about, but with the radio sites and the towers and creating a ring, would that provide better radio access from our, fire teams in the woods?
It should, yeah.
That would be epic, because there are times where there is no radio contact and no cell contact.
Yeah.
So that would be pretty awesome.
And yeah, that's certainly something to work with ODF on.
Yeah.
Because they have their own radio sites and infrastructure, that isn't necessarily where public safety or cells and
But with their fire team response, it would be probably behoove all of us to.
Commissioner Toyo, and then Commissioner Thomas.
Quick question with all the discussion, coordinated effort. Possibility of IG with different agencies that utilize it, and we can cost share and then sharing.
We,
Consolidated services.
but we currently do that. We probably need to look at the formula right now. With Astoria, it's a per call base. And it works out that for us about $27 per call. So, and that's for everyone. If you're a fire department and you're fire alarm fire, you got 5 or 6 fire agencies in the last 8 hours, that's $27. If my POs go out to do a home visit, they knock on the door, they go out on the radio, they knock on the door, talk to someone for 5 minutes and clear, also $27. Yeah, so when a deputy goes to the door, there's civil paper again, 1, 2, 3, Bay Street, and I leave in 30 seconds, $27. So maybe there's other ways to split those Yeah,
uh,
so part of the governance model will be looking at how do those costs, how are they allocated to the user members, and then how are they allocated to the non-user members, meaning sometimes school districts and others want access to the phones, to the radios and to the dispatch. And so then they would pay a fee on top of that, but that's all part of the governance model, because we're gonna have to do things differently as we move forward. Again, Seaside and Astoria do things differently, and even though it's a system, they do things differently. So obviously, there's just gonna be a lot of detail work about how do you stand up an organization to do this, and then what's the role of all the user agencies, and then like in the county's case, do we have kind of a super role because we're the largest user of the system? And so those are all things that the sheriff and the group are going to be working through, so.
Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you, sir. Is there any relationship to the radio network? Is it redundant but unrelated, or is there any integration of any kind?
So it's not integrated or related. Ham works on different radio frequencies and the public safety, predominantly, they can't access those. We haven't been working with them, but bringing Justin into the team, he has a curriculum with the ham radio operators, and so can represent their needs and interests.
So you talk.
I just want to say I love the rave reviews you're provided about Justin, because it's not the first time I've heard that about him, and I feel like we hit the jackpot when we hired him, so. Yay.
It's always nice.
It's always nice to hear good things.
That's good. Thank you. Glad to hear that. I mean, it's really scary because people's lives are at risk every day. Fight for progress. Yeah.
Well, sure, in support of that, I attend the ambulance advisory group, and to listen to the tearful pleas of our frontline folks. It's heartbreaking. I mean, it's absolutely heartbreaking. I think that's something we need to work on, helping them. And I think once again, Justin's going to be terrific help with that. But I think that one of the things, and maybe this is just completely out of order, but one of the things that I think ought to be a bigger part of our comp plan. What are we doing today? What day is it? What day is it? Is this whole idea of resiliency. I mean, we are, we're working in different directions. We're doing the sea level rise. We're doing the, the emergency management and that we speak about in some very broad, non-specific way. And especially now that we have this fabulous staff leadership, is there a way to put that someplace that's higher up on the list? I don't know. Because I think it's an issue that intersects with lots of other issues. There are so many there's some individual actions. And when a person, I've talked extensively with former Mayor Jones, who was on site in his helicopters at Katrina and has unbelievable stories about what happens. I'm kind of really at the point where now we know we've got, we're getting earthquakes all the time off the coast. But this thing is gonna happen, and it's gonna happen soon, and if we don't get ready for it, this is not like waiting to do your comp plan for 40 years. This is much worse than that. We gotta be ready. And, I just wonder if there's a way to jack this up into a higher.
Yeah, I mean, Commissioner, I think I agree that resiliency has a lot of different spokes on the wheel, and we're certainly doing a lot of things like with the 911 system, like with the EOC, we're approaching the EOC differently. We have much more communication with our fire agencies. So there's a lot of good that is happening there, and certainly planning is doing a lot of work. Part of my caution, where I think that's absolutely essential and we need to continue focusing on it. But just thinking about Justin, is that Justin came into an organization and into a community that had a lot of emergent issues that he's needed to really focus on. And so part of me says we just need to let him have the time to work on these big issues, but also have time to kind of get us focused on what are those next steps, because part of what he will be developing is a work plan for emergency management that includes input from the board and from other stakeholders, so that he has kind of a plan moving forward. So I think maybe in a document, we can identify kind of what are the projects that are kind of in that resiliency mode. And then I think ultimately it's just continuing this work plan development process so the departments are all integrated and the board knows what their priorities are, because their priorities are based on the strategic plan. So.
But something what planning has done with their work plan to me is so impressive. It would be really useful, I think, for the major departments to be able to come up with some of it.
Yes, and most of them have come up from as part of the budget process this year, so they're kind of first year plans, and they will grow and become a little bit more robust over time. Emergency management, they have started that too, but it's going to take Justin a little bit of time because of what he inherited. There was just a lot of pent-up issues and challenges.
So.
Excuse me, commissioners, I just want to step in my role as timekeeper for a minute here. This is when we're supposed to be at break, and I have noticed a couple of you having the same sense that I think I have right now, which is you're having the kind of discussion you wanted to have. You've done 5 of the 18 topics, and you've done that in about 2/3 of the time available. It may be that the most important ones are the ones that were in front, but it may not be. So I think it's time for a break and then kind of figure out how you want to get through the rest of the stuff in the time available or extend the time.
I agree, Terry, and we need to move a little more briskly through it, and I know we also have an executive session that we want to have at the very end of this. I have a hard out at 12 o'clock, so yeah, we're gonna have to move a little faster. Thank you, Sheriff.
Sitting here or there.
Okay, are we gonna take, how much time do we need here? Just,
I would say less than 5 minutes.
5
We can
minutes,
do it.
okay. Okay, we'll get back in 5 minutes. Thanks, Terry.
Because you might be actually property. Yeah, it's really,
It's kind of complicated.
yeah, it really has.
But Chair, my commitment is to be really brief in my.
Okay, we'll all honor that as we kind of move through the rest of these. So state, county, transportation, safety improvements, tier one. Identify funding for feasibility study in the Astoria Mangler Bridge. And develop a plan for safety improvements along Highway 30.
So, Chair Taylor, members of the board, what I see this as is kind of just a container for state and county transportation safety improvements. What those might be, we don't know. There's been conversations about transportation safety communities. There's certainly conversations about improvements along certain sections of Highway 30, but there's also concerns about other state highways. And so I just think for me, it's just a topic, which is highway safety, and then where it goes will be dependent upon the board and future conversations, but it's just the topic is a priority. And I don't know exactly, there are some legislative concepts out there, but I think what we have to come back to the board is have a conversation, including the sheriff and including Terry and including others, just about what is the right path forward and how might the county participate and create a forum for that. Because a lot of the highway safety issues are state, issues also. So that's what our thing is just creating, having a conversation about what the right path is. Again, to be more strategic and less reactionary. So in a nutshell.
Anything else on that?
Partnerships and connections, the apps, the OTC, the all that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mine's just communication. I had an email from Napa High School, one of the seniors at Napa High School, and which I forwarded to you, and helping our constituents identify the directions to engage also in this very important topic.
Okay, move on to the rural broadband expansion. It's a tier 2 item.
So as I provided updates, there's a lot of work going on within rural broadband right now from the private side. And so we're still trying to get all the detail from our private providers on the investments that they're making through the Rural Digital Opportunities Fund resources that they have received from the federal government. I've shared that it looks that they are going out into a lot of the areas that we were contemplating investing some of the ARPA dollars. And so if that is the case, then it's still on our list, but it may be a private provider who is actually doing it, and it may be quicker than what we all had anticipated, and maybe a service level that folks will desire, because it's actually fiber to the home. And so this is still a priority and something that we're connecting with the private providers on. So, but what our role is may change as we go through this. Right now, our role was as a funder through the ARPA dollars. That may or may not need to be the path forward. And so that's the wild card, is we don't know yet. So.
Just a reminder, I've seen things installed on the north side of the highway. I was wondering if we could circle around with Charter and ask about the south side of Highway 30.
Yeah, they are going on the south side.
They are,
too, but
nice.
What I've asked for is the map that actually show where they're going to see fiber by road, so that you can see it
all over.
Yeah, because it's a little complicated, because both the state and the county are the permitting agencies for this, but we only have visibility on the county side. And a lot of it is on the state side. And so certainly 202, 53. And so we're trying to get a consolidated picture. So as soon as we get that, I will
Nice.
share that with everyone. So.
One thing, it's great that we're finally getting covered within the rural areas. Future, I just know, like in the future, can we, as a county, be a facilitator for competition? Because right now, it's monopolistic. you
Wouldn't it
know,
be
and,
nice?
One aspect is, we pay $1,000 a month for broadband for business here, and then McMinnville is actually more bandwidth and more throughput is $200. So that competition will be advantageous for all the residents in the future. I know the infrastructure is a huge issue, getting along, but after things are in place, could the county be a facilitator for that future competitive advantage for the residents?
On a side note, yay for kind of industry.
Well, when pigs fly is the phrase that comes up.
Uh-oh.
Because if you go to the Oregon broadband and listen to the Business Oregon, what's happened is that the private providers have gone in to help write the legislation that gives them an effective monopoly. So I think it's a noble intention, but if you can do that, brother, my head will be off to you. That is even steeper than the other things we talked about. It's time to move on. I think it's a long history.
Okay. County gates and levies, tier 2 item. Probably increased importance in light of the county manager's comments with the buyout. And
And it is something that we're fortunate again to have our new emergency management director who has experience in this area and is already working to just get a lay of the land on what the status of our levy systems are and the governance structures of them. So I think this is certainly something that we will work on, and I think we'll get a little bit more sense of what those specific actions are as soon as we start working through a work plan for it. But we may be introducing some additional resources to this in terms of consultants and things as we go through it. It's just one of those things that Justin is over one time to get there.
Can I just have somebody make a note that when Justin is ready to reach out to Ed Johnson and Bransky regarding our levies?
Yeah, they have touch
Okay,
base.
they have.
Yeah, Justin went out to a meeting out in Brown's meeting to talk about.
Yeah. I was in another meeting and I couldn't go to that meeting, so.
So
Yes,
they-
perfect. Thank you.
yeah. Anything else? No. Okay. Carrying capacity analysis.
So this really, and I'm going off my memory, at the tier 3, but this was a carrying capacity for the Lewis and Clark area related to infrastructure and growth. And part of it was, as you know, there was a moratorium on development within Lewis and Clark at one point because of concerns about the aquifer. And so that went away, but there's still been ongoing questions. Gail and I have met with the state and have talked about Lewis and Clark and what their concerns were back in the 80s. If they have any concerns now, what the process we might use to look at both water capacity, quantity, and quality, and and just see what the carrying capacity of the aquifer is, because that will obviously influence development in Lewis and Clark, but the buyout and other things will influence the development within that area also. But I think in our conversations with the state, there are some resources that might be available to us to at least start the conversation. Plus, we have our ARPA dollars that we set aside for some of this work. The infrastructure needs, just real quickly, as you know, in the urban, in the unincorporated areas, so it's not urban unincorporated, but the unincorporated area are going to be challenging because counties don't provide urban services. And so we don't have the ability to provide sewer and water by statute. That's a city's role. So I think looking at it is important. We've started the conversations with the state. It's a tier 3. We're going to keep doing that. Part of it is that, as everybody knows, planning is consumed with getting a comprehensive plan done. They've been doing a lot of other ordinance updates. They have these 3 other consulting contracts, including the economic opportunities analysis. So their plate's kind of full, but this is something that we would like to start to work on. I don't know if that was a nutshell, but
Okay, tier 3 item was the evacuation routes. Tsunami evacuation facility improvement plan.
again, this is a convergence between the work that Gail and her staff have done, and then also emergency management. We just need to take it to the next level. And so, in partnership between those 2 departments, the goal would be to start really looking at the evacuation route and making sure that we have the infrastructure plans. As we know, in the tsunami plan, one of the ideas was to put some of those structures in place so that the folks who are in the tsunami zone would have a place to go that would be safe. And so we just need to do some more work, but it's going to take both Justin's department and Gail's department to really go through that, and also fire and law enforcement. So we would like to start working and continue. It's part of the resiliency factor. So.
Then impacts of sea level rise and public infrastructure.
Again, this is part of the ongoing conversations that are coming out of the planning processes, and ongoing conversation about how the county would like to approach the challenges. So again, it's a conversation that needs to start with our partners. So.
I went to 3 of the local meetings, and I was pretty disappointed. The attendance wasn't good, and their emphasis was kind of entirely on I don't know, the preservation of community physical assets. It was a little weird. So I'm hoping, are we going to hear back from those people?
Yeah, I mean, we will plug in to them and, benefit from the work that they're doing, but it's like all things, we might end up going a little bit of a different way.
That was what disappointed me. I mean, they didn't talk to us before they did this program. It's another one of those, the state comes in and says, this is the program.
Moving on to economic development. So versus the economic development strategies and plan. So some of these same issues that Commissioner Banks brought up earlier.
So there's, on the economic side, there's the economic opportunities planning that we're doing through the comprehensive plan, which that will may inform some of this, but the idea here was that we really work with all of our partners and identify the sectors that are opportunities, and then look at how are they being supported, what are the regulatory structures that are barriers, what are the other barriers, education, we know housing is a barrier, but it's to really look at and be more strategic about what the community is doing to support growth and retention within of critical business sectors. And again, the idea is to be more strategic and have all of this working together. And we just don't have a plan like that. So,
And Colpack is a partner, an iterative partner. Because that's a big part of what Colpack does regionally and can gain us a lot.
yeah, and I really see this as something that will be not just only led by the county, but it have to be led with Colpack and with Cedar,
The sea of cities.
yeah, cities.
Yeah.
So,
CFEDC.
yeah. And I think a lot of it is, I mean, once, we just need to understand what are the factors that go into economic health. And then what are the barriers that are restricting that? And then again, like I always say, it's just being honest about what the path forward is, so we can actually move forward, so.
Tourism management is identified as an essential need for that industry. If we're looking at partners who can help us maintain livability and increase the economy, I think the management of tourism, anything that relates to that would be useful to include in this as well.
Yeah, I'm sure tourism will be a player in the economic discussion, so absolutely.
But the management of it, not just,
Well, we do a bit of that now.
I understand that. I'm asking for it to be iterated here.
Sure, we can add tourism into this. So,
Okay, let's move on to the increased workforce housing inventory tier 2 item. That's regional housing task force.
so this is the ongoing work that we're engaged in through the task force. It's obviously taken a little bit of a slowdown with the recent changes over in NOAA and the fact that the ARP dollars that we had invested. Now coming back to the county, and we decided how to provide some of that technical assistance to ourselves as well as to the cities. And so, but the good news is that there is a lot of discussions going on about workforce housing and all housing. And if you look, we'll be updating the housing dashboard, but there's a lot of units that are coming on. And there's a lot of discussions that are ongoing about other potential larger developments. And so obviously I know it's a priority for the board. We just need to get our hands around, again, how do we help facilitate that with our partners? What are the barriers? What are the opportunities? And like the conversation we had regarding ARPA dollars and City of Warrenton, that is a conversation that would increase workforce housing and facilitate the development of housing. And so those are the kinds of things that we would like to talk about. So there's kind of a toolbox and everybody knows what that is as we are trying to do this, because cities can't always do this by so there's kind of a conundrum where cities are identified as the vessel for affordable housing or for all housing. The amount that's going to be in the county, in the unincorporated county, is small compared to what is going to be in the cities for obvious reasons. So, but the cities have barriers. And we all know that. And I just think that we need to all get on the same page with the cities and the county and with NOAA and our private partners and say, how do we best approach those barriers? Because it's not going to be, from a public policy perspective, satisfying to say, well, there's barriers and it just can't get done. Because I don't think no is an answer at this point. We have to figure out how to get housing built. And so that's just one example, but I think having this collaboration with our partners and identify what are those tools, because if the county can help in the sense of using ARPA dollars potentially for a City of Warrenton infrastructure project that then facilitates development, that could be a win-win for everyone. So,
Just, man, the impact of increasing urbanization that would be, impelled by the development of more workforce housing in the urbanizing areas of the county. That part of the comprehensive plan, there may be some kind of tie in here, because if we, we've had a proposal to put housing in Arch Cape, which is an urbanizing area. And we can have an impact on that trend, so that we look at it from a comp plan policy perspective, but also where do we get the housing any place we've got land, because it's needed everywhere. And having those challenging community conversations, I think is going to be an opportunity that has a cost, but still worth doing.
Commissioner, one quick one, just yesterday, we did have another regional task force meeting. I think the consensus was that, it's not called permanent supportive housing. It's not called, permanent temporary housing. It has to be thought of differently. Most people think of it as here's, supportive housing, temporary housing. Here is low income. Here is workforce housing, and they occupy their investment. It's got to be okay. We're going to find you some supportive housing to get you here. That's not permanent. That's transitional to what's the pathway to from there. What is the pathway to workforce housing? And so it's a path, not a destination for each module of housing. So with that, we all agree too that every city in this county has to be unified in our approach. It can't be just one singular city, one singular entity doing it, because no one can do that. If you get too much in one area, we're going to draw people in, it's going to overwhelm the system. So it's got to be a unified approach across the entire county. And then at that point, the county can actually assist with, like County Manager said, infrastructure to facilitate that growth in that process. But it has to be not just a workforce housing inventory, but it has to be basically a housing process that has to be developed and processed through.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point real quick. That's why having every city be at the table and also be talking about what are some of the code related barriers and some of the planning barriers that the cities have. And again, let's help each other out. I mean, let's share resources where we can. And so
In this process, I'd like to identify, in unincorporated Clatsop County, situations like trailer park situations that are having septic tank issues, and the owners or the property owners. I've just seen it trying to cross the state where those parks are closing and nothing is being built to replace what is closed, and so those people end up being unhoused or end up being struggling because of the park's low rent. They can't go somewhere else. And so I don't know if we just need to spend some time and identify our properties that we have in our incorporated Clatsop County and kind of consolidate that in your conversations you're having.
Well, another factor is we need to speak against some of the state policies. We have these rent control rules that actually deter people from owning and having rental units. It's so, it does not favor the landlord whatsoever, individual investor landlords. So that's why the housing supply, rental supply is down, because everybody bailed out because they could have someone renting, living, never paying rent. You can't kick them out. So that deterred us. So we have to look at those policies and those are in place and see what we can do to, provide input to how do we change this to make it more conducive, more people to the inventory back.
All good points. A lot of good work. Serious. Good points. Let's move on to the environmental quality priority. And this is first tier one is water quality needs assessment.
So this is contemplated work with our watershed councils, is to really understand where the watersheds are. There's a lot of really good work that's gone out there. Some of it in partnership with the county on some of the grants that the watershed councils have been accessing. And there is a lot more monitoring, both on quality and quantity. But that's just, there is some work that needs to be done just to create the kind of connective tissue that I talked about between the watershed, councils, Crest, and the county. And so that's really what this anticipates, is it's a collaborative process that we can all have the data and then support each other to go through this, so.
And at the legislature, Rep. Owens and Rep. Helm, their work is so important. We're feeding into that and being part of that, to the point earlier about how are we proactive. I think that kind of engagement with them would be extremely useful. Thank you.
We talked a lot about the FEMA buyout already. I mean, that is moving to a tier 1 item.
I think it's-
Yeah.
it's-
1A.
That's really long. The impacts are-
Right next to the HCP.
KCP is tier 1 too.
Yeah.
Proper, nothing of septage.
So this is something that we've been working on with a lot of our partners, looking at the options both to deal with the immediate septic issues as well as the longer term options of like an anaerobic digester. We had a consultant working with us. Those conversations on the anaerobic digester side are ongoing. With Cam Riley, City of Warrenton, they're very interested in seeing something happen. We've also had productive conversations with both Warrenton and with Seaside about potentially options to then start accepting septic again. There's some issues over in Rainier regarding their system, and they're going to be limiting the septic that is hauled there. Part of the factor is we have some options here, but they're more expensive than currently taking the septic over to Rainier. And I think Rainier is looking at increasing what their rates are, which may push them back to some of the local options. And so we continually work on this issue from both sides. One is there a way to be able to receive septic within the county? When I say the county, I mean cities. County doesn't have, wastewater treatment, so we rely upon the cities to take the unincorporated and Earhart septic. And so that's ongoing. It's a tier 3, but it's something that we are going to continually work on. And I think the market's going to dictate how quick some of these options need to be pulled, but the good thing is we have options identified. But there would just need to be some investments made with some of the city systems. So
Yeah, Warrenton's key in this. Commissioner Banks and Commissioner.
I just was curious if we can think of some sort of, carrot or promotional program within the county to upgrade septic systems in rural unincorporated.
So yes, thank you, Commissioner. There is a grant program that the state is funding as kind of a conduit, and it's to upgrade septic systems for those that can't afford them.
To go to the concrete.
And so there is programs out there now, and they will be coming online soon.
Okay. Can we link that to our county website?
It's an active partnership, and we will do that. It's a 3-county. I think it's 3 counties. I think it's Toma, Placer, and Columbia.
Oh. Excellent, thank you.
Commissioner.
Who in our staff is responsible for this? Where do we have?
Right now, Monica's been the one coordinating it for us. Gail is obviously involved too, but when it comes to managing the contract with Monica, when it comes to talking to the cities about things they can do to help us accept septic locally, Monica's been leading those conversations.
Okay, because it seems to me that increasingly that's a staff issue that I don't control, so never mind.
Well, I'm always open to feedback. So.
Anything else on septic? You want to move on? Social services and childcare.
Gold stars.
So, and childcare is 3-1, and we're just continuing going forward.
Yep.
Love it.
Homelessness initiatives and actions.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of conversations going on with the cities. Obviously, the project turnkey that the Columbia Inn is a major, new resource, in the community, but it's just gonna take ongoing collaboration with our partners to really have an integrated system. The Commissioner Toyoka's point, where you have balance throughout the county on resources and assets. The good news is some cities that haven't been part of the conversation are now part of the conversation. Deerheart, obviously Seaside is doing a lot, Astoria. But we just need to make sure we're all coordinated. And so that work continues. I think it's gonna be a part of our strategic plan moving forward for the foreseeable future. We'll see what comes out of the state resources that may be available to Glassell County. There may be some additional infrastructure that the county needs, like we have on Columbia Air. But we need the resources for the state to make those things happen, so.
I'll agree on the city's agreeing that a zero tolerance towards policy would be a potential avenue to take assistance from the county from the land use. Where do you define the spaces to put homeless? If we can have services, we can have those things. We talked to, Dirk Baker, most people don't want to be homeless. So if you provide it, you see, we're not allowing you to be homeless in our cities, in our towns. You have to go to these locations, that then you have the services available to help people get out of it. Is a faster recovery. So it's quick discussions with the other cities, it's a viable option, but there's so many different things that need to be coordinated and worked out to even make it possible. Yeah, but that's one topic of discussion we can keep going on. But again, it has to be unilateral across the entire county.
Oh, isn't this just the darling thing? Because underneath this, in my mind, is ballot measure 110. And we can have low barrier or no barrier housing, and that deals with a certain segment of the population. But then what we do in effect, if we have conditions for participation in housing by saying, hey, you can't be actively using, we're adjusting to the need that the state has, I want to say that we voters created. Because what do you do with people if there are no sidebars and no consequences? So how do we do with compassion and still be effective in doing that progression, that growth curve that you described in housing and personal functionality? And for me, that's the kind of the whole picture of what you're talking about in these various issues. It's a big thing to wrestle with. And we do have the impact of the state ballot measure that we have in the attempts to modify it to accommodate with sidebars and consequences. We don't want to be an attractive place for people to come and behave badly.
I'm just curious if some of the drug settlement monies could be used to address this particular topic.
Yeah, the drug settlement monies are kind of being interwoven into
Okay.
a really comprehensive kind of public health strategy, which includes housing,
Okay,
services,
awesome.
everything. So we're trying to integrate them to create the systems, and I think that's what Commissioner Toyoka talks about, and I think that's what a lot of the cities are really talking about now, which is there has to be systems and structures behind this that are mental health focused, alcohol and drug treatment focus, job focus, and just basic needs focus. And the more that we marry those with housing, and then I think Commissioner Toyoka's point is then knowing that there has to be a continuum of housing options so that it's not a one-stop, it's a progression. And so, and I think that's what the cities are also talking about. One of the things the cities are talking about now is toilet homes. They're talking about, camping locations, and all those by themselves aren't going to be sufficient. You need to have wraparound services with it. And so all those, I think that we've come a long way with the conversation. And I think there's a lot of activity happening in the community. It's just, we need to align some of the resources with the effort, and that's where it can be a challenge.
So quickly, so here's what I see as a resource that is deficient, and it is the management workforce of all varieties along the spectrum. Whether it's folks in tents or all the way up through it. I think, I don't know where that goes in our plan, but in terms of workforce development, we don't have property managers, we don't have shelter managers, we don't have, and I'm talking about paid, consistent, high quality staff. I think that goes in here somewhere, but I don't know where. And I don't know that we have control over it, but if we're paying attention to it and working on a systematic basis with all of our partners everywhere, we're more likely to develop it or discover it.
Yeah, I think this is very top of mind for CDH. I think it's something that they, I've had conversations with them about it and with, because I think in terms of workforce development money, one of the things that we have to start thinking about is a special segment of our workforce training dollars going for people who have perhaps in the past been homeless. And it's different than the standard provision of resources from the community college. It's a very segmented thing. Community colleges are moving toward this. Lives in Transition at CCC is one of them. And I think we need to be thinking more about that. And I think that some of the money needs to be going for those places.
Okay, Commissioner Mansbrook?
I just would be careful in this conversation of government taking over too much of the weight of solving the concern and focus more on how we can incorporate our private industries and our private nonprofits to help spread the weight out, because as we are forecasting, our budget is not going to support additional right now. And so we need to figure out a way to incorporate, bring in the private industry, the private construction, privatize it a little bit more, because they can get it done faster. And a lot of the grants can still apply to them. So it's just my thoughts.
I think that goes back just real quickly into what I think we would probably all agree on, which is, for a safe, livable, sustainable community, healthy community, every part of the sectors need to be working well, and that includes the civic sector, the nonprofit sector, the government sector, the business sector. No one of those sectors has a monopoly on solutions or on resources. It takes everybody, and that includes the faith community too. And so I think part of what we're all trying to focus on is we all know that there's not a short fuse. It's all a super long fuse, and then how do we manage that super long fuse between all these different sectors? And I think we're doing a pretty good job of it right now, but it's not always clean, it's not always clear, but I think that's, no, but I think that is ultimately what the solution is. Because what I've recognized over my many years is that government can't be all things to all people. We can't solve every problem. And I think when you look at county governments, we're a multi-purpose, general purpose government. We have special funds that are single purpose governments, and they're by design single purpose. Counties focus on so many things that we're diffuse. Doesn't mean we don't want to do all those many things really, really well, but we're diffuse, and we don't have the tax base to add more to those diffuse services. We're already maxed out in what we are doing, both in expertise and in resources. So for me, it's not unlike an analogy with, with broadband, is that certainly there are governmental agencies that are taking over broadband as part of the public utility infrastructure. But for a lot of rural counties, a lot of rural places, it doesn't always make sense because they don't have the bandwidth to do that on top of all the other things that they're trying to accomplish.
Is that a pun?
And so I just think part of my thing is that part of the strategy is trying to get all the different sectors to help us and to be focused on the priorities that make a community safe, sustainable, healthy.
Yeah. I think that's a great summary. Yeah. Let's move on to our last priority. I don't want to jeopardize not getting praise from Terry for moving so quickly through the last two. We want to move through this one. Crisis stabilization plan, tier 3 item. It's the countywide strategy to expand local crisis stabilization.
So yes, so this
Yeah,
is,
this says what we're talking about.
yeah, and this is really a future capacity issue, and it goes back to the conversation we had regarding state help to develop the infrastructure that the counties need. This is really some really critical infrastructure that will help the hospitals, help law enforcement, help our mental health providers. But right now, there's no ability for counties to create this ourselves. And so it's a partnership that we need with the state ultimately, and a different philosophy from the state to really say every community needs to have some of these infrastructure assets to be a livable, safe, humane place.
Yeah. Okay. Any final comments? Good.
Okay. If I could, you're about 25 minutes over. There were, I think we can do the rest of it in less than 10 minutes, if that's okay. Is that?
I think some people have a hard stop there coming up in the next 5 or 10 minutes. So
Okay, yeah, well, this is going to be,
an executive session too, so.
okay, let's just do this quickly then. With regard to this exercise you just went through, I'd say you've done a great job of clarifying your objectives and the actions you want to achieve them. And it gives a lot of direction to staff on how to polish this. We've now been through these 18 items a couple times and nothing got cut, nothing got added. So I think these 18 are what you've got. That's a lot to have, but we've got tiers, so you'll be able to get through that. And you've already had examples of getting through that. So that's my summary of where we are on this. The last item on the agenda was next steps. And very briefly, the main next step is getting a plan to you. And the agenda shows when that will happen. But I just want to make a couple of comments on that, which is that you have done the one thing I want to remind you of, Amanda, I don't know if you have a picture of that strategic plan first page. Does that come up? Yeah, there we go. You just passed it. Right there. This is just a reminder that is the change in the top in the way it's written. It's an annual update. It's the 23-24 priorities, and that's in the big print. And then it is a part of the strategic. It's a piece of the ongoing development of the strategic plan for 2021. And then the table of contents is pretty much what it was last year. And the bulk of it will be about these strategic actions. And in appendices will be your evaluations of what you've done so far. So that's what you can expect next time. And I think you can expect that it will be pretty easy to have a discussion and to get to adoption, because there won't be anything new more than what you've talked about today. With that, I just want to say that for my part, you've done a lot of work. I think you're seriously, I think you are at the 95th percentile of local governments that do strategic, of local governments, of the ones that do strategic planning. I can't say you're at the high level there too, but you're doing a better job than most local governments by far. You've got a good understanding by the board and of the staff of what your roles are with respect to governance. Got good working relationships. And that said, however, I just want to say there's always more to do. So there are things that you can do to improve your implementation. And Don and Amanda are going to be talking about that very briefly. And I just want to say for my part that I think this will be my last meeting with you on this contract. It's kind of the end of my work here, and I was kind of wondering, well, how's it going to go? And then I sat around today and realized I was just sitting around today, and there's really nothing that I had to add that you couldn't do on your own. So you've got Amanda and Don and Monica and the rest of your staff doing a great job on getting the planning together. The board has done a tremendous job over the last several years of getting into this process and doing an extremely efficient job of it. So I wish you the best in the future, and thank you for the opportunity to work with you.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. We really
Thank you,
appreciate your guidance throughout the process for multiple years throughout the process. So
And
thanks
good
so
luck-
much.
Yeah, good luck with Columbia County, because they hired him too.
Oh, yeah, perfect. Great.
Well, I think, given what.
Go ahead, Don.
It's all, right. You can go, Terry, if you want to say anything else.
Yeah, what I wanted to say was go ahead, Don. So I've done that. So you're on.
Okay.
Thanks, Terry.
So I don't think that we need to do this today because of the time constraint and wanting to have the executive session, but at the end of the agenda, there's a number of things that we'd like to come back to and talk about. That's how often do we come with the progress reports on the projects? And just, how we provide them to your board. We want to make sure that we're providing the right frequency and that we're doing it in a way that you can access it. And then just what level of detail, but we can work through those on another day. But this will be an iterative process. And so, but I think if you're okay, Chair.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great
Thank
to
you.
go.
Thank you, Don. Okay. Let me see if I can get there. Thank you very much. Yeah. Watson County Board of Commissioners will now meet in executive session. The executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.660 subset 2 subset H to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely